It's hard to believe that more than 200 years ago, 13 colonies has successfully found its identity through thick and thin, with all the people fought the war and also sacrificed altogether for the much greater future. But meanwhile, fast forward, looking ahead, in the year of 2023 and also 2024, America today is standing at the crossroads, politically speaking and also economically speaking. If you follow the news closely, more than 10 candidates from the GOP side have successfully declared their interest in running as the next president for the country. What is going to happen to the country, and will the fate of the nation be changed for the following years? 4 years, 8 years, or perhaps maybe for centuries? Hey everyone, this is Will, and welcome to this brand new and exciting episode of The Missing Piece. Again, as we mentioned before, 2024 is only 1 year ahead of us. Now, so far, we have more than 10 candidates from the GOP side express their desire to change the nation. How about the rhetoric? Some believe this country is in crisis, politically speaking, and also regarding this whole social welfare, Medicare, the war in Ukraine, and also the battle with China, the economic imbalance. But meanwhile, some people still believe the best days are still ahead of the nation, and people need to be unified, and also we need to tighten the gun control. In this episode, we'll sit down with one of the international experts who covers extensively regarding the US elections for years and also the campaigns. And more importantly, this person believes that right now it is still too early to believe that any of the candidates could stand out. What about Donald Trump, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Tim Scott, and also the only female candidate right now is Nikki Haley? Well, again, in this episode, we're going to cover all of the questions, and also we're going to get into discussions in depth, because we know the fate of the country is going to be changed. But meanwhile, because of the unpredictability of US, and also that link to the fate of China, the countries in the Middle East, and also the nations in Europe. I hope you enjoy the show. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker. Again, if you follow our show, you should be familiar with Dr. Michael Patrick. Dr. Patrick is an international journalist, and also over the years that he covers multiple presidential elections and campaigns, and his expertise and analysis indeed always enlighten our viewers and audience. So today in this episode, we're going to talk to Dr. Patrick regarding all these questions. Well, Dr. Patrick, and welcome back to The Missing Piece.
Well, thank you, Mengfei. I really appreciate it and being with you and your very kind audience.
Well, again, Dr. Patrick, as we mentioned before, right now we're only 1 year away from the 2024 presidential election. But right now, within this whole GOP field, there are almost more than 10 people has already claimed their interest and also filed their presidential bid. And as we mentioned before, from Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, and also Mike Pence, the former vice president under Donald Trump, and also we look at Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, who is the former governor of South Carolina, and I mean the list can go on and on. But the first question, Dr. Patrick, I'm very much interested in knowing from your perspective is, who is your favorite kid at this moment, and what do you understand based on all the candidates has already declared their interest running as the president for the country?
You know, that's kind of a fascinating question, because it's like taking temperatures. At any one moment, it changes. And especially this far out. Some of these candidates, I think, are already know they're in trouble. I think most of the candidates are floating in the single digits compared in the polls, although polls are really take one today, take one tomorrow, they'll change. I think yeah, we see right now the big boys in the room, of course, are Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and how they match up. One of the interesting things when we look at how deeply divided the country is, and I don't think that's an accident, by the way, that Joe Biden still pulls somewhere around 44% of the American public in general if he were running. So his support is remarkably high given the sorts of issues and troubles that he's been through. When they put Biden against Trump, Trump leads by about 7 points in a recent poll. But again, Trump has been in trouble. I think what you have is so much alienation among the public that it's more about who holds the biggest grudges, and the American public is unsatisfied with a lot of them, especially Trump and Biden. And there was a poll that was done that said about half of the American voters would love to consider third-party candidates. I think people are really tired of, fatigued by the shenanigans, for lack of a better word, going on in Washington, where everybody's weaponizing politics, weaponizing the courts, weaponizing the FBI, and using whatever they can to go against whatever candidate is upsetting to them. I mean, when we found out when Twitter changed hands, we found out that both the CIA and the FBI had direct access to playing with Twitter. And so we see all sorts of things that are rather astonishing within the context of the American political system. The things that may have been going on before, but we certainly weren't as clearly aware of it. And then with not just Twitter, but also with Facebook and others. So you've got a lot of turmoil going on within not just the candidates, but the very mechanization of Congress and of the White House. And so the confidence that the public has couldn't possibly be lower. The trust levels have been shattered in so many ways. So this is going to be a back and forth, watch the polls today, watch them next week kind of thing. There's no clear person to run for president right now.
Dr. Patrick, again, as your former student, again, I'm very honored to be your student. Of course, indeed, that over the years that when we talk about leadership and when we talk about the rhetoric, of a leadership, that we tend to pay attention to the words. Now, Dr. Patrick, I want to get your take on this. By listening to different candidates, and especially some of them, again, without naming them, too often they tend to say that this country, it's in crisis, or this country, it's on the brink of a collapse. So again, Dr. Patrick, from the leadership perspective and from this rhetoric perspective, how effective is the message? So in other words, I think, again, I'm not an American citizen, but as a outsider or as a person who used to live in the US, and I always say, if I were the voter or if I were the American citizen, and when I pick a person who's going to shoulder much greater responsibilities for the next 4 years or next 8 years, I want to hear a message of positivity, and I want this person to have this optimistic attitude and not just telling me that this country is in crisis or this country is in turmoil. Again, those negativity doesn't really help the voters to grasp the concept from the candidate. So again, Dr. Patrick, help us with better understanding. How effective is the message when the candidate today holds the town hall or goes to the rallies and speak to the voters and speak to the people? do people really buy into the idea today that this country is in turmoil, this country is in crisis, and we really need a savior, or we need someone who's better, younger, perhaps even a different gender to save the country for the following 4 or following 8 years? What do you say to that?
Well, you're making a very valid point. Everyone is out there trying to come up with the words they can deliver and to inspire the public to believe that they can deliver and that they can meet what the public's interests are. And right now, the public is very disenchanted with the current leadership, with anybody within, even close to some of the decisions that have been made. It has been a nonstop problem from the southern border to Afghanistan, to China, to Russia, and Ukraine. People are deeply divided on all these issues, and I think that we're going to have to see who's left standing. But the interesting thing is that Biden's not looking forward to debating, as people don't really want to put him out there in a debate. Trump is back and forth on this. They're trying to even figure out who can deliver the best, most positive message, because at the end of the day, the public has to trust that this person can deliver. And we see DeSantis weighing in terms of his promises, saying, "Look at what I've done. I can deliver." Everybody is ponying up with their favorite pitch. I don't think that these promises are going to decide. I think so many events are going to take place over the next year and a half before we get a sense of what's going to drive the public to the polls. I think there's so many events that are going to unfold, not just the inside the Beltway game, the politics that, whether Wray is held in contempt or not, whether Biden is running in circles over bribery when he was vice president, allegations. I don't think the inside the Beltway baseball, which is what we're hearing now, it's all inside the Beltway baseball. I don't think that's going to determine how people vote. The public doesn't trust this current crop. That's why they're saying, give me a third option here. And so I think we're going to see major, they say that foreign policy doesn't drive elections, but I think this round could be an exception, where issues such as Ukraine, Russia, and China are going to kind of weigh in from the outside and make a difference more than many times and periods in the past. So I'm not saying that the number one driver will be foreign policy, but I am saying it's going to be a significant game changer. And how all of this politics then plays out into the pocketbooks of Americans, that is the pocketbook usually is number one, and I don't think that's going to change. But convincing the public that with all that's gone on, that you can improve their lot, that they'll feel, oh, I'm better off than I was, 4 years ago. I think we've yet to see these issues clarify. I think right now it's just noise in the air that won't necessarily decide the elections.
Dr. Patrick, I know during the pandemic that you and I, we had several discussions and regarding the direction for the country. And if I'm not mistaken, again, back in the days when Bill Clinton was running as a presidential election, and again, he came out with this simple but impressive sentence. It's called, "Is the economy stupid?" So in other words, everyone paid so much attention regarding the economy. And again, fast forward, we're looking at 2023, And economy is still the number one issue that on every single American citizen's mind. So in other words, I don't want to pay for the extra dollars at the gas pump. And I want to make sure I have enough money to bring food on the table and to send my kids to school. And also, you know what, when we talk about healthcare, we talk about social welfare, I really would like to more, again, that really tie into the issue with the veterans and etc. So Dr. Patrick, again, regardless who is going to be the next president, again, it could be Joe Biden again, or it could be someone, again, as you mentioned before, from the third party. We don't know that yet. But how significant it is today in terms of understanding this economic issue for average Americans. So in other words, is economy still the number one issue on everyone's mind? And how come that politicians or even the presidential candidates cannot explicitly or clearly explain this economic agenda or even this economic projection? What is the problem with that?
I think people are not trusting the system. Trust is the number one issue, not the economy per se, yet, because the numbers seem to shift. There's the old adage that figures don't lie, but liars figure. No matter what the latest report is, everybody's spinning that report to their own advantage. I don't think that it's going to be a case of people watching the numbers and whether the economy is rallying or not rallying. I think they see that, but what people are doing is saying, it costs me more money to buy groceries and put food on the table. They're going to look at practical issues in their own lives. But the number one issue for the candidates is going to be trust. And that is an issue which people are clearly going back and forth on. And the candidate who can come across as the most stable and trustworthy and not get caught in another scandal or lie or something like that has some survivability in this race. And I don't think that person is clear yet.
Well, Dr. Patrick, I want to continue our discussion. And recently, I came across an article, and the title of the article seems so interesting. This is what the name of the article is called. It's great to have a president who knows when to shut up. Now, again, when we talk about the temperament of the candidates, again, we're looking at Donald Trump, looking at Mike Pence, looking at Nikki Haley, Tim Scott. I mean, the list can go on and on. Dr. Patrick, again, based on our previous discussion, what do you understand, or how should we understand the temperament of the candidate? Do we really still need someone who constantly babbles? I mean, not just in person, not just on a campaign rally, but also on social media, pretty much about everything on this person's mind? Or it's time that we really need to put someone who's more mature and who's more well prepared, or should I say well established, to be in the White House so can put this country back on the right course? What do you say to that, Dr. Patrick?
Well, I think that there are two factors that are at work in answering this question. Number one, for the American people, is trust. Does the person conduct themselves, have they conducted themselves in a way that the American people believe they can trust them to advance their interests and to secure the future? I think that's a critical issue. Trust has never been a larger issue, given the division that exists among many factors in American culture and in the body politic in the United States. I think that credibility, which is, next door neighbor to trust, is critical for foreign leaders. Who do they take seriously? That if they say something, they mean it, they follow through with it, whether they like it or not, they know what they're dealing with, because that kind of credibility leads to a level of assurance on many different levels as to whether their word is their bond, whether their word, they can count on what that person is going to do based on what they say. And it's not just a lot of saber rattling, for example, which we can readily spot on the horizon out there. So I think that those are the issues that will help to guide this election, not only for the American voter, but for what foreign leaders are having to say and what their role in this is, because we're kind of kidding ourselves if we don't recognize and don't believe that what's happening internationally is going to play a very relevant role in the coming U.S. elections.
Dr. Patrick, I want to going back to the person called Mike Pence. And again, two questions are very simple. Number one, some believe that Mike Pence still has much greater opportunities, and not just because he was the former vice president and under Donald Trump, but meanwhile because of his Christian faith and also his unshakable belief, American value. Again, if you listen to the interviews and if you listen to any type of conversation and dialogues that he had with all sorts of media, unshamefully speaking, that Mike Pence is very firm with his Christian value or his Christian belief. But meanwhile, Dr. Patrick, another piece of reality I want to get your take on this is his attitude towards China. Again, I'm not going to mention who the person is, but I want to read something to you and I want to get your reaction on this. The person believes, or one of the candidates believe, that China is the only country with both intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to do it. And we know that previously Mike Pence has been very, very critical on China during his vice presidency. And meanwhile, he points several significant issues that really beef up with China. So, Dr. Patrick, from your perspective, how should we understand Mike Pence's decision to run against Donald Trump in order to secure, hopefully, the president's position for next year? And also, how do you think that he's going to handle the relationship with China if he were to be the next president?
I think that's a fairly straightforward question and answer, frankly. I think he is hoping that he will prove to have the stable character and image that after all of the fist fights are done, that he's still standing in the ring as the best bet out there to deliver what the American public wants, which is a more stable future than what they've seen. Now, he's operating in the single digits, as are most of the other wannabe candidates at this point, or announced candidates, of course. So I think he has something to say and something to play. I think he does represent, out of the Republican side, more of what I might call the military corporate industrial complex. The deep state is the slang in the United States. As we look at Mike Pence, I think we've yet to see how he is going to deal with the issue of China. China will help shape that response. Right now, that when you have warships and warplanes running close to each other, I think right now that the tension is pretty high. There's not a lot of dialogue that's meaningful at the moment. Both sides are kind of checking each other out. I think Pence has an opportunity to step into this, and he probably will make some bold statements at the right time. Right now, he's not looking like he wants to be the candidate to wade into the middle of things right off the top with China. But we can rest assured he will weigh in on it. I think he is going to take a very centrist approach to it in terms of representing what the military-industrial complex, as John F. Kennedy called it, what their feelings and thoughts are about it. Right now, that kind of like core industry of military and industrial and political entities are really supporting Biden. They're really Biden isn't necessarily driving this ship, but he represents the cohort of Democrats who are calling the shots, and that's why they're encouraging him along. In many ways, just as to add to that, I think that particular group is less supportive of Biden. He's simply the person that implements things that they direct. But I think they're watching Obama as a core driver in that Biden leadership complex. So we'll wait and see. We will hear from Pence. Pence will be around for a while, I think. I don't think he's going to drop out early. I think he's playing a long game. So we'll wait and see.
Dr. Patrick, two more questions before letting you go. Again, if we look back in 2016, I guess one thing that you and we discussed back and forth is saying for American voters, domestic issues are far more important than foreign policy. Again, that was the year before the pandemic. Of course, 2020, that was in the midst of the whole pandemic, and everyone cares so much about the domestic economy, social stability. But fast forward, Dr. Patrick, we're in the year of 2023, again, looking ahead for the following 4 or even 5 to even 8 years. Foreign policy still matters to the United States of America. But the next question is very simple, Dr. Patrick. So far, among all the candidates, I guess we'll say few of them have only come out with selective sound bites towards foreign policy. You know, again, you mentioned Afghanistan, China, nations in the Middle East, and also a partnership with NATO, the European allies, etc. Dr. Patrick, the next question is very simple. How does foreign policy still influence during this presidential election campaign for all the candidates? Because remember, people are going to ask the questions on those topics. And there's no way that they're going to dodge the bullets. And there's no way they're not going to avoid the questions. So how do you think the candidates are going to handle the question on foreign policy? Should they continue to hold this hawkish tone towards certain countries, or maybe time to soften it in order to maintain what we call international peace order? What do you think?
Well, if we just look at what Biden's wrestling with, Biden is wrestling with bribery charges involving Ukraine. It's his son in ties with China. There's a lot of foreign policy tied up around the White House right now, and it's not all favorable. I think that they won't speak to it right now in the race. They have to establish who they are and why they're a player to the American public. That's who they're trying to speak to right now. And that's why you see most of them in the single digits. DeSantis and Trump are the only two rising in any kind of a recognizable fashion with the numbers. That'll change over time. There will come a time, either driven by an action caused by Putin or by China, that may kind of foist it to the forefront, in which case then they'll have to be ready to roll out their answer. But right now, they just want to know that the average voter in Iowa knows who they are and thinks that they're at the top of the class.
The last question, Dr. Patrick, again, you and we discussed this before regarding what we called political polarization. And again, this is not just what's happening in the US today, but also around the world. But everywhere we look, and people seem to believe that US is still champions democracy and still champions for a political just, or we say a political balance. So Dr. Patrick, again, as we're looking at all the candidates, as we're looking ahead for the year of 2024, question might sound simple, but again, you're the expert, really want you to dive into it. Is there any way that we could avoid political polarization regardless if a Republican or Democrat or even a third-party candidate can be placed in the White House? Because we know that today, as we mentioned in the intro, violence seems to be the only solution to any problems. Violence seems the only spotlight to any disagreement, and we can't have that in this country. Again, as we mentioned before, I'm not American, but when I live in this country, I want to enjoy the peace. I want to enjoy the stability. I don't want to see people holding guns or have the fights on the street everywhere, again, bashing the police. That's not fair. So again, Dr. Patrick, from your perspective, looking ahead, how should America continue to avoid political polarization in order to reduce the violence or, again, to reshape the image of America for the entire world?
Well, I think the United States is going through a major change, a major cultural and political change, and economically, it's so many issues involving inflation and other sorts of things affecting that right now. We can't ignore the fact that China is taking its place on the world stage in a much more powerful way than ever before. So whoever is going to step into there and become a reconciliation candidate in some way between some of these factions, that's some pretty big shoes that nobody has yet filled. And just because someone is outspoken like Trump doesn't mean that they can fill those shoes. I don't think we've seen the sort of actions take place that can point to any one candidate. I will note that, as you mentioned, Pence, that he was taking a pitch of himself and placing himself in the field as someone who might be better at bringing people together. Certainly that was a promise of the Biden administration, and it was anything but. People are concerned about whether Trump, and that's one of his greatest criticisms about him, is can he bring people together? He can cut deals. That's a little bit different. So we've yet to see a lot happen. There's a lot going on as you well know, on the international stage that will play a role in this election in a number of questions that are coming up. But nobody in my mind has stepped up to that plate in a convincing way to the American public yet. That's why we have that's why we have a race going on as people try and move into that role, and they will be tested by the events that seem to happen every single day, every week on the world stage that it directly involves the United States in some measure.
Well, again, Dr. Patrick, again, as you mentioned before, it is still too early to see any indicators regarding any prominent candidates, or again, we see someone who's gonna stand out in a few months. But again, there's no denying that this country, it's absolutely standing at the crossroads, politically speaking, and also economically speaking. But meanwhile, China and again, other countries are also paying attention to this presidential election. We hope that in a few months, that not only Pence, but anyone else are able to come up with better strategies to identify themselves among the voters, and also, and more importantly, really know how to have this meaningful and engaging dialogue with countries such as China, with the countries among the Middle East. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to speak to Dr. Michael Patrick. Again, Dr. Patrick is an international journalist, and over the years that he covered presidential elections and campaigns and all sorts of related issues. Dr. Patrick, thank you so much for taking your time to join the show. We really appreciate your insights. And again, let's keep in touch. If you do pick your favorite candidates, please let us know. And we will love to know who is going to be the vice president candidate and this person might pick. But anyway, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much. And next time I want to hear your response to these very questions. What role is China going to play in the elections, and how do they view the what's happening in the United States and on the world stage right now? I'd love to hear your answers.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for the time to be here.
Absolutely.